Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Yeah. Here we go. You dialed set correctly to USA Prepares. We're delighted you're with us in class today. The largest preparedness broadcast in the country. We broadcast 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Nathan is engineering the broadcast at GCN in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. We're going to be talking about land today. How to buy it, how to buy land, what to look for, what to avoid. Things you might not necessarily think about. Rich Scheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. Rich Scheben, welcome.
Well, thank you, Vincent Finelli. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing really well. You know, Rich, you and I have spent time together, and we've talked about land, and, you know, we each own land that we have selected. We've looked all over, and we decided on specific pieces of land that match our interests, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And one of the things that I can share with you, class, is that Rich Scheben has been to the farm right here in Missouri, and he and I have walked part of our farm. So he's seen it, and we're going to talk about topography. We're going to talk about what to look for. We're going to talk about what to avoid. We're going to talk about maybe some cost of ownership. And we're going to talk about planning for the future. And, you know, we think time is running short. Rich Scheben lives off the grid and has for years. He has no electric service from any utility company. If he wants to have electricity, he's got to provide his own. And we're working in that direction. We have off-grid capability here, and we are running partially off the grid. And I'm all excited, Rich, because yesterday we were finally able to drill with our tractor-powered auger enough holes in this rock-hard soil to put in some piers. We've got half of the piers in already, and it'll take one more day to put the rest of the piers in, and then we can erect the solar array and increase our solar capacity by a factor of 4. I'm all excited about doing that because that will put us to the point where we can, if we want to, we can shut down our connection to the grid. So it's a different lifestyle, and I'll tell you what, if you're in the habit of wasting anything, if you go off the grid, it will be an eye-opener. It'll be, well, might even be painful. What do you think, Rich?
Well, I see what's happening to America and our economy, Vince. I look at demographics, debt, credit, pensions, valuations, so many headwinds for future rates of growth, huge inequalities between the haves and the have-nots. I see an incognito caste system arising, which is another name for status quo. And I see a lot of people losing their skill sets from the old 19th century ways, which we have to dovetail with 21st century technology. Gardening, raising animals, hunting, fishing, solar, recreation. You know, we got to break away from this cookie-cutter, follower, politically correct subdivision mentality. And we have a situation in America where 90% of people live in urban, suburban America. And the middle class, as we all know, is losing a ton of ground. So we have to think outside the box and try to deal with the rigging of the game from the corrupt central bank system, Keynesian economics, the demographic issues that we're heading into, and group identity politics and affirmative action quotas and the many, many subsets, hundreds of subsets under the category of political correctness. And people don't know where to turn and how to go about things. So what I see coming is eventually the stock market, the bond market, the housing market. I see a lot of things in urban, suburban America, especially commercial and retail, going to be very compromised in the future because we are in a deflationary spiral right now. But one of these days, the powers that be are going to say, hey, how can we sell bonds when the interest rates are by zero? And we could go from deflation to inflation almost overnight. And when that happens and interest rates start going up, everything's going to crash. Emerging markets, interest in our own debt, things are going to get very interesting. So from what I see happening now, Vince, I see a lot of millionaires and billionaires buying land. I see everything being held up by central banks printing money out of thin air. I see CEOs buying back their own stock to make their books look good, even though their core business has totally erupted. And when all this goes down and we can no longer break out the erasers and this virtual reality of fantasy finances, and the mainstream media sees this, I think there's going to be, I think rural America is going to be the only tangible savior for people with common sense and logic. Vince?
You piqued my interest when you're talking about the loss of skill sets. And you're absolutely right. Young people today really don't know how to do many things. And we've talked about this on the air. Things that we take for granted, raising the hood and checking under the hood of one's vehicle, rotating one's tires. Simple things. And I read an article that young people today are going to their parents to have them help them with common things that young people should know how to do, things that I learned at a very, very young age that these young people just don't know how to do. And I find it foreign to think about hiring a painter to paint a room in my house. It's foreign to me. However, there are plenty of people who just say, painting, that's a pretty hard thing to do. Got to get the brush and you got to get the paint, you got to stir it, and man, getting the paint from the can onto the wall, gosh, that's pretty complicated. But yet people will hire others to paint their houses inside. It makes no sense to me at all. It's never occurred to me to hire someone to paint our house, inside or outside. Mm-hmm. And yesterday, we're talking about skill sets. Rich, even I mentioned that I took a non-contact thermometer, and I aimed it at our garage door. I couldn't believe how hot the garage door was. It's kind of a tan color. It's not like it's black, and it absorbs the rays of the sun. It was so hot you could not put your hand on it. And this was weeks ago. The sun was facing the garage door, and I put the non-contact thermometer on aimed it at the side of the house, and it was, I believe somewhere around 118, between 114 and 118 degrees, the temperature of the stone. And you've seen the stone, it's pretty thick on our house. And it was still that hot. And I aimed it at the roof, and it was 174 degrees at one point. And I was thinking, man, at what point are the shingles going to start sliding off the roof? Well, I shouldn't have said it. No. I was outside yesterday. In the gutter is one of our shingles that kind of melted and slid off the roof. And we used they're called architectural shingles, so they're not the 3-tab, but they're sort of like that. And where it came off the roof is like the very top. I mean, it couldn't have been at a higher spot. Impossible. And I have a 40-foot ladder, and I don't think it's tall enough. I really don't think so. So my son and I were talking about how we're going to do this. And we said, okay, what we'll do is we'll put the ladder in the bucket of the backhoe, and that'll give us a few more feet up so we could get this 40-foot ladder so we could reach, one of the highest parts of our roof. Our roof has a very steep pitch. It's 1512. And so it's pretty darn steep. And it's not a fun thing for anybody to want to do. So I have to think about that. And what I'm talking about is a skill set. Now, how many people would look at the shingles on top of a roof that would take more than a 40-foot ladder to get there and say, yeah, we can do that. You know, it's not going to be any fun, but yeah, we can do that. And so we have lost a lot of the skills that we've had. Another question is, who would we, if we wanted to, who would we call? Who would we call to do that? Because I can tell you that the guys that roofed our house, when they were done, they came up to me and they said, you know what? We bid this job based on the plans. If we knew that the roof was this steep, we never would have done it. So they're not going to come back. So we're kind of on our own. So when we talk about skills, I think that there are a lot of skills that we've had and we've lost. And that's a bad thing. It really is a bad thing. And if we add that to the amount of people who have failed the drug tests for jobs, there aren't many people left. Jeez. Yeah. Right?
Well, Vince, you got to look at what's coming. Robotics, automation, artificial intelligence are going to take so many jobs. You know, so many people are clicking for dollars, you know, trying to play the stock market, which, you know, fundamentals, valuations, PE ratios, PS ratios, everything is all fake and phony. Everything's been bought and paid for. And nothing really makes sense anymore. So we got to go back to, when I give a lecture on what I call Fort Prepared and say things about thinking for yourself and reading and researching, asking questions, being debt-free, I'm giving you some examples here, 10% silver and gold, a little cash, maybe a little U.S. Treasuries, maybe cryptocurrencies. I think there's a lot of ambiguity right now. Being around like-minded people, having food for more than 9 days. But the skill sets that I'm going to talk about briefly regarding land after this break is really the most important. Vince?
I agree. You know, you can follow doomsday preppers and have all the toilet paper in the world, but if you don't have skills, it's not going to be all that much good. Yeah. We're talking about land and we're talking about skills. For the next 2 hours, we're going to teach you some of what we know about how to buy land, what to look for. But right now we're talking with Rich Scheben, Off-Grid, Montana, about skills. Rich, please continue.
Well, thank you, Vince. First of all, regarding the skill sets, and I'm not saying I'm not a proponent of college because I've been to college. I got 3 degrees. I'm just saying that the value for 90% of the degrees are worthless. And if I was a parent or a grandparent, instead of paying money for college today, I'd really think about buying them a piece of land where they can learn skill sets. Maybe they can do family land transfers and not have to go through subdivisions, but still split it up and give themselves a lot of options. A lot of options with land, and you'll learn a lot of laws regarding skill sets for land. For example, you can use your pre-tax dollars and buy land. Now, you can't legally live on that particular piece, but you can buy the adjacent piece and make that part of your farm or part of your ecosystem, part of your privacy, part of your investment portfolio. Gardening. Everybody in America with what's coming down the pike right now with GMO foods and hormone steroids, antibiotics, and chlorine and fluoride and 200 other chemicals in our city municipal water. You know, we could talk about this for hours in a whole different show. Gardening and digging a well is absolutely the most important thing right now because your health should be paramount. Cancer rates are going through the moon, folks, in America, and even with children. It's amazing. And then you look at the obesity famine or situation that we have in America. People aren't getting out. They're not being physical. They're eating all this crap food that has no nutrition in it. I mean, a lot of these foods are being engineered in the laboratory, in the Petri dish, in vitro, or the test tube to not have antioxidants in the food. Okay, it's a slow kill. We need to start growing our own food and gaining the skills. Now, animals, whether you raise them or you hunt and fish for them or a combination of both, like I do, is a skill set that probably 95% of Americans don't have anymore. And this needs to be learned. It's analogous to gardening. You don't just throw seeds in the ground. You have to know to get heirloom and open-pollinated seeds. You have to know what type of soil to use for what type of vegetables, what plants are compatible with others, and what competes with the nutrition in the soil. These are all skill sets that you have to learn through trial and error and reading. Edible and medicinal plants. I remember in fact, I was on the John Moore show, Vince, about 4 years ago. I remember making a comment that for 6 months out of the year, you could walk behind me with a bottle of salad dressing and I can keep you fed, just harvesting edible and medicinal plants. You would not believe the comments from around the country I got, because people have one idea or one solution, and that's going to the just-in-time grocery store. And if there's any calamity in this country, economic, financial collapse, we moved to the SDR, special drawing rights, where 40 to 60% of the value of our dollar gets eliminated overnight. War. There's so many things that we're really hanging by a thread on, and people just figure, the grocery store will always be there and there'll always be inventory. That is not going to be the case. So edible and medicinal plants, I have like 50 edible plants on my property. I give, here in northwest Montana, we have a ton of edible and medicinal plants, and I give tours on edible and medicinal plant harvesting. I do that as a community service for people, just to get them interested in botany and thinking outside the box. Again, hunting and fishing. These are skill sets that are absolutely mandatory if things get rough, okay? And that's one of the reasons I live in northwest Montana, because the human population to natural resource ratio is not compromised. Now, and this is why I talk about buying land and acreage and rural property. But when you do all these things, folks, you know what really happens? People come to you, okay? Whether I give a talk on this issue or tours or I do radio shows, people want to know about this information. And teaching and helping others is really the bottom line. This is where it's at. And that balance in life between nature and technology is what we're really losing. The average American spends 7-8 hours on TV and the smartphone per day. That's got to be reversed.
Yeah, what good is that? Really, what good is that? We'll be right back. Rich Stevens with us. Rich, I really like peppers, and we grow them here in our garden. Well, there's one that I really like. It's called pepperoncini. It's the Italian name for a mild hot pepper. And I used to be able to buy them in gallon jugs at Sam's Club and some of the other large box stores. Well, they don't sell them anymore. So I had to search all over Springfield, and I finally found a company that would sell me them, but I had to buy a case of them. I had to buy four 1-gallon jugs, and I wanted them in glass jars so they would stay fresh for a long time. Well, they arrived, and they were in plastic, and I unscrewed one of the lids, and I found out that the aluminum plastic paper seal at the top was corroded through by the brine that the peppers were pickled in, and I unscrewed all of them. I didn't breach the seal, I just unscrewed the cap, and they were all the same. So I brought them back, and I said, really, I'm not interested in opening these. And the woman at the store that ordered them specially for me said, I wouldn't eat them either. So they refunded my purchase price, and but here's the point. So I was thinking, no big deal, I'll just grow them. Really? Well, I ordered seeds, and I can't get them to germinate. They won't start. So when you talk about skill sets and you think, all you have to do is have a couple packs of seeds and you're good to go and just throw them in the garden and everything's going to be fine. The answer is that's not true. That's not true because, number one, the seeds may not germinate. Okay, and then there's soil conditions, soil temperatures, and pH and so forth. And it's not necessarily easy to grow a garden. I think most people who have tried it have failed at least once or twice or three times. And I certainly have. And so even if you have a great garden, and right now I can say that Mrs. Finelli has created a fabulous garden. And we used cattle panels and we surrounded the garden to keep the critters out, to keep the dogs out, keep the chickens out. It was fabulous up until last week. And then we had these Colorado potato beetles, and they had a convention. They must have had they must have had smartphones, and they all converged on our garden. And I'm not kidding. These little buggers have eaten every leaf of every one of our pepper plants. And all you have is stems. I'm not kidding. And when I looked down last night at these little buggers, it was like looking down on New York City with, all the taxi cabs going from place to place to place, all these cars, traffic everywhere. And you just replace that traffic with these little buggers, and that's what I was looking down on. There were millions. I'm not exaggerating. This garden, these guys came in and they ate every leaf of every pepper plant, and literally all that's left is the stems. And so Mrs. Finelli brought in every edible piece that we had a couple days ago, and these buggers have destroyed the garden. So we talked to the guys at the local farmers cooperative, and we said, hey, so what are you guys doing about this? And they said, we spray insecticide, 7. And, we deliberated over this, and now it's kind of too late because they've destroyed the garden. But, yeah, you can spray commercial insecticides, and it'll probably work. But will you be able to get them in the future? Well, if you don't store them, it's going to be difficult to have them at the ready. So that's just one more thing to think about. Are you going to store insecticides? And if you think that you're just going to throw some seeds out there and have them grow, I'm telling you, these guys have destroyed our garden. And so if any of you have an alternative to insecticide as a remedy for this, I'd love to hear it. And here's what I've come up with. We've tried dousing the leaves with lime. We thought, well, they wouldn't want to eat the lime. Oh, yeah? Yeah, they eat around the lime. And then they eat the lime. So that didn't work. And we tried vinegar, and that didn't work. So now the only alternative that I can think of is to take the garden apart, burn everything in our outdoor wood furnace, and then cover the entire garden plot, it's a raised garden, with black plastic, and let it bake in the sun to a temperature that will kill the eggs of these little buggers so they don't come popping up next year. It's the only thing I can think of. Other than insecticides and other than rototilling insecticides into the ground and destroying the fertility and the biological nature of our garden, other than that, I can't think of anything. So, Rich, do you have a solution? Because I don't.
I think I may. First of all, when you put black plastic down, a lot of that plastic deteriorates into the garden, and all that heat really helps destroy a lot of nutrition. There's 2 suggestions I'm going to give you. And a lot of people have problems with spider mites in their greenhouse. That's one of the most... you talk about a gang with cell phones killing your garden, and there's very few things that will kill it. And my suggestion is, and it works, you just got to be on it. You'll never get rid of them. It's kind of like having knapweed. You never get rid of it. You just manage the amount of noxious weeds. And that is pyola oil, Pyola. You buy it as a concentrate. And the secret is to get under the leaves with a lot of these pests as well. The pyola oil acts as a film and suffocates, and it works quite well. And the second thing is for your outdoor stuff, I learned this, and this is in the book, and I learned this from a British Columbia farmer. This was a trick he used because people want to stay organic. They don't want all this insecticide. They don't want this poison in their body. And that is mosquito barrier. You buy it as a concentrate, and it's 99% organic garlic juice. And that keeps quite a few pests away. So that would be my number 1 and number 2 suggestion for your situation, Vince. Now, every time you water or it rains, that's why I water my garden with by hand, and I try to get underneath the leaves and try not to dampen my vegetables because it will wash some of this stuff off. So every other time I water, I put a new application on, and it seems to work pretty well.
Yeah, I was thinking about a laser, and going hunting. for these bugs.
Well, good luck.
Well, I mean, I'd have years of targets. But I'm going to look into Paola oil and the mosquito barrier. I've written those down. But I'll tell you, what I'm trying to say is, if you think that you can just jump in and grow a garden that will support your family, probably isn't going to work. I don't know anyone. I don't know a single person who was successful the first time at gardening. Not one person. Do you? I mean, partially successful, yes.
No, you never stop learning. And I'm going to give you one other thing for your listening audience, and that's diatomaceous earth, especially when you use a lot of. When you use a lot. Well, that's mostly for like root crops, like when you have radish bugs and beets and turnips and carrots, and you have pests, and even cabbage family roots. Diatomaceous earth, you put a handful in when you plant whatever you're planting in that area, and that really keeps a lot of those borers and maggots from infecting your garden. And it's trial and error. You got it, but those three things I just mentioned took a lot of years to learn. So I hope your listening audience is writing those things down, and it does help a lot.
Yeah, I suggested that to Mrs. Finelli, and she went out she just dusted the plants with diatomaceous earth, and I think they think it's candy. That did not work either. So the only thing that we've heard that works in this particular situation is Sevin, the commercial insecticide for these little buggers. And we've talked to our friends, neighbors, farmers, and that's what they've said. We've tried a lot of the alternative methods, and they have not worked for us. Now, we did not put the diatomaceous earth in the soil. We just, after these buggers appeared, then we let them have it with it, but that didn't work either. But we're going to, I think what we could do is rototill some DE into the soil and see if that works. And, the garden isn't all that big. It's just like 30 feet by 30 feet or 36 by 36, something like that. But it's frustrating. It really is frustrating to grow a really nice garden, and we have. It was fabulous until these guys came in and ate all the leaves.
Yeah, and it happens. And diatomaceous earth is more for the underground pests that bore into your root crops and affect your cabbage family roots and things of that nature. But the Paola oil and the mosquito barrier, or 99% organic garlic juice, really works quite well for keeping certain things off the surface. Now, I'm not saying it's going to. I've never had that potato bug. Here in the North Country in Montana, we don't have a lot of the pests that you guys have down in the South. Obviously, there's benefits and cons for each microclimate in America, but because you have longer growing seasons and you can grow certain things that I can't grow, obviously. But we also have a situation that we just don't have a lot of the pests that you guys have, and that's really nice.
Yeah, and like, for example, in Florida, they have a tremendous problem with termites. But here we don't. And in Michigan, there's no, Terminex would not be able to survive in Michigan if it were dependent on just termites, because people in Michigan don't have termites. At least that's what I've been told, because of the climate, because it gets so cold it kills them. But in the South, they flourish, they thrive. So you're right. There are pros and cons to each locale, and you chose Montana for all the reasons that you liked, and we chose Missouri, and there are pros and cons to each. And both of us have rocks, and it's difficult to grow a garden in rocks. So we actually had to scrape the topsoil from one area of our farm and bring it over to another area of our farm, and we took concrete blocks and set them around, built kind of a barrier, 2 blocks high, 12-inch blocks, and then we filled that whole area with topsoil that we scraped off when we built our barn. And it worked pretty well. but we got to figure out the bug problem. Rich Scheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. So, Rich, during the break, I called the Farmers Cooperative, and I said, do you guys sell Piola oil? Never heard of it. Never heard of it. They did a little bit of research while I was on the phone. And they found a product that had pyrethrins. And I said, okay. They said 38%. I said, okay, what else is in there? Don't know. Okay, so 62% unknown, 38% pyrethrins. So I'm not going to do that until I learn what's in the rest of it. So I'm just doing a little research trying to find out where it is. What I found during the break is that on the internet is that it seems to work pretty well. So I'm going to pursue this and see if we can let those buggers have it with Piola oil. But just one more time, class, really, if you think that you're going to be able to grow a garden just because you have seeds, it may not be the case. And one other little tidbit of information. Years ago, I bought some seeds. It was a seed vault, and I bought it in the 1990s, late 1990s. And I happened to run into the guy who sold it to me. He was at one of these prepper conventions, and he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you our latest seed vault in trade for the one that you got in the 90s, because I want to see if they still grow. So here's the point. When you buy these seed vaults, you have the expectation that they're going to last years and years and years, 25 years. And the guys that sell them don't even know if they work. So just a thought. Just a thought. And that's absolutely true. I mean, I know the guy who sold it to me. I met him, years ago, but, about 20 years ago or so. But now he doesn't know if they would grow. He wants to try them to see if his claim was right. But he didn't know. And the interesting thing is, if he wants them, I'm probably the only guy that would be able to provide them to him, because he himself didn't keep them all these years. Because if he had, he'd know if they grew or not. So there's the dilemma we have. You buy a product and it says, like LED lights. Yeah, 50,000 hours. How do they know? They don't know. I know they don't know. I talked to an engineer. He's one of our instructors, Bert Bertonis. I asked him, how do we know that these products will last as long as they claim? He said, we don't know, because we haven't had them that long. They're brand new. So what they do is they raise the temperature of the device, of this electronic device that they're going to make the claim about. They raise the temperature and they extrapolate out what they think would be the life expectancy. And I can tell you for a fact that I have LED lights in the kitchen. Rich Scheben has seen them. And I made this 12-volt LED system, and it's all running off the same 12 volts for a couple years. Some of them, 100% of them are working. Others are half burned out on the same power supply, the same 12 volts. So I'm telling you that these claims, these electronic claims of longevity, are not necessarily true. And I've proven it. Rich, land? You want to talk about land?
Absolutely. And I just want to put an exclamation point on what you just said regarding shelf life for seeds. I look at the average seed lasting, in my mind, about 3 years, okay? And I say that to be conservative, and that's the way you have to think. So one day, if things get really bad, a lot of these seed companies will not be available for you to buy. You're going to have to start harvesting your own seed, and that's why heirloom and open pollinated seeds are so important. And after the break, we'll talk more specificity and detail on land.
Yeah, we're going to teach you what to look for when you buy land. And one of our instructors came out to the farm, and I spent half a day with him showing him around because he wanted to buy some land in Arkansas. And he ended up not buying it because he realized he didn't know anybody in Arkansas. Absolutely true. We'll be right back. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares with Rich Scheben, offgridmontana.com. We're going to talk about land, what to look for what to consider if you decide that you're going to pursue having some land the way Rich Scheben does in Montana and the way we do here in Missouri on our farm. Rich, please share with us your thoughts.
You bet, Vince. Thank you. Well, first of all, as I mentioned earlier in the show, millionaires and billionaires right now are buying raw land like it's going out of style, and they do not make more land, okay? There's a war on cash. There's a lot of ambiguity on the value of the dollar and fiat currencies in general, and even got confidence in central banks, not just the Fed, but all central banks around the world. So land is the only thing that is real, that's tangible, and it's going to give you the skill sets and the recreation. And that's why I always say live where you recreate. Now, the first thing about land, and I'm telling you, this is my perspective, my opinion, and what I've done, okay? Every time I buy land, I always look for variety or character in land. And that starts with variety in topography. It could be surface water, rocks, ridges, draws, meadows, anything that gives me more places for game to hide, because I'm not just into hunting and fishing, but botany in general. I enjoy looking at the animals. I enjoy the different edible and medicinal plants on northern slopes and on southern slopes. I enjoy everything about nature. So I look for all that variety and topography. And the most important thing about variety and topography, where you have ridges, draws, meadows, rock, is the more character in that topography, the less probability of you having adjacent subdivisions next to your land. I cannot tell you how important this is. I know people who've bought, smaller pieces like 2, 5, 10, even 20-acre parcels. And then somebody next door bought, because they had kind of flat-type land, someone next door bought another parcel right adjacent to them, and they put a huge subdivision and destroyed their privacy. So that's one of the reasons I always talk about trying to look for parcels of land of 20 acres or more, because here in Montana, 20 acres gives you forest or agriculture zoning, which is a lot less in taxation. Now, when looking at the macro equation of land, folks, what you need to look for, what I mean by that is the valley or the county that this land exists in, where you want to reside. So in the valley, I did a lot of research. I looked at water aquifers underneath water. I have tons of lakes here in northwest Montana. But I looked at the valley that I live in. We only have 25,000 acres of private land. We have over 90% public land or Forest Service land here in northwest Montana where I live. So I looked at, again, where the human population to natural resource ratio would not be compromised, and I looked for all the natural resources, especially water, because water really is blue gold, because all the municipal water has so many. I mean, look at the frogs and the fish turning into females because of all the pharmaceuticals and the crap that the elites are putting in our water. I mean, you can't live like that, people. So, and what I like about northern climates versus southern climates is when you live off grid, it takes a lot more energy to heat a home to cool a home than it does to heat one. So because we have a lot of timber here, lots of wood, where we can use wood stoves, it's very easy to heat your place in the winter. But because it's cool at night here in Montana, we don't have to worry about air conditioning. We just open up windows, close them in the morning, and the cabin or your home stays cool all day, and that works quite well for us. Even these days, we're well up into the 90s, and our nighttime temperatures gets below 60 every night. So we don't have to worry about AC. Now, in the southern, look at Hurricane Katrina. In the southern exposure states, food and water was contaminated within a couple days, because when you have a calamity or an EMP or a flood or a financial collapse or people shooting transformers with all this wacko terrorism going on everywhere, you just never know what's going to happen. Food and water is contaminated within a couple days. Here in the northern part of the country, we can literally dig a hole in a northern slope and preserve our food at certain times of the year for as much as 6 to 7 months. And if you live in an area where you have undrinkable water, you got to look at the value of the land and survivability of that land. So we just have a lot of, in these economic times, a lot of uncertainty regarding pretty much everything. So I look at all the natural resources that I get on this very topography, from trees, and the recreation that I have, not just in hunting and fishing, but the recreation from ornithology, the study of birds. I love botany. We pick mushrooms. Just in my garden this year, I picked tons of strawberries, raspberries, and service berries, and we also have choke cherries. It's like a smorgasbord here. So if you learn about this stuff, you get to appreciate nature and botany, and then people start coming to you and asking for tours and asking for information, and then the best part of everything is giving back and teaching people certain skill sets. So think about trees being free heat. Think about raising animals, everything. We have chickens, goats. This year alone, we've got probably, about 11 or 12 baby peeps from our chickens. So what we do going into the fall, we eat a lot of the adult chickens. Next year, our baby peeps will be adults, mature adults, and we'll get eggs from them. And we constantly rotate stock. And I harvest a lot of plants that are immune stimulants, like red clover, and the list is just never ending. We should probably do a show on just edible medicinal plants sometime, Vince. So the way we live, it really feels like we're on vacation. It's kind of a penny saved, penny earned mentality. And I'm really a huge proponent on being out of debt. The only thing I believe anybody should be in debt with is buying land and a home. That's it. Not cars, not vacations, not furniture, not food, not college educations. If you don't have the cash, you don't pay for it. And that's what land kind of teaches you. It gives you, it simplifies your life and teaches you basic skill sets, and you'll really learn quickly the fine line between needs and wants. And that's why living off-grid and having a solar array really helps, because during the winter months when the sun is scarce because of clouds and low daylight, we use a lot less energy. And if we don't have it, it's kind of like, again, in the analogy of money in the bank, we don't use it, we don't spend it. But land, especially rural land, when you look at what's happening with illegal immigration, refugee status, you look at sanctuary cities, gun-free zones, I think it's very obvious when you read and research that the powers that be are trying to herd what's left of the poor and middle class into urban, suburban America so they can control them. And I think these places are going to be very dangerous places to be. So if people can start thinking outside the box and gaining skill sets, especially if you're a parent, a grandparent, really think twice about sending your kids to the social indoctrination of college today, because 90% of the college degrees are worthless. Now, if they're going to go into nursing, if they're going to become a certain type of an engineer, I think there are certain benefits to going to college and getting a degree. But for the most part, again, robotics, automation, artificial intelligence is going to take so many good jobs here in America. So I think we need to start thinking with foresight. That's why you hear me say often, we need to shoot pool and play chess. Because what are the best pool players and chess players have in common? Foresight. They think 2, 3, 4, 5 moves ahead. And let me just give you an example. When you look at taxes, okay, taxes, insurance, maintenance, they are directly proportional to the size of your house and your structures on your land and not your land size. So if you can live in a house or a home or a cabin that's tiny, and you live on a good chunk of land where you can basically create the benefits of those skill sets, hunting, fishing, raising animals, gardening, putting up fencing, clearing land, parking out timber, doing all the things that make your value in that particular land go up. In a sense, you have a job just living on that land from the penny saved, penny earned mentality. And then when you get to a certain age, you sell that land, and that is your retirement. And as I mentioned earlier, there are companies out there that you can use your pre-tax investments, which right now the stock market is so artificially high. If you took that money and you bought land with it, you can live your dream. Again, not live on that particular piece, but buy a small piece and then buy the big piece adjacent to it, and then you have your dream parcel. There's so many ways to think outside the box. I mean, look at the and I try to mention this on almost every radio show I have, not to be pessimistic about the future, but you look at the sobriety tests and the litmus tests of what's happening in America today, especially being so drunk on the Kool-Aid of political correctness as so many Americans are. For age group of 50 and under, the number one cause of death is drug overdose. That's a nation in despair. And I think it's because we don't have options and we're losing jobs. We've imported inflation overseas to low-cost producing companies. Wages and economic growth is dropping like a rock. We have to start thinking outside the box, folks, and I think land is a great solution. Vince?
Yeah, I was thinking about what you were talking about, college education. I was thinking about how many people do you say, so what are you majoring in? Sociology, phys ed, art, marketing. Really? Really? How's that going to work? Rich Sheben's with us. Rich, when we were looking for land out this way in the Midwest, and one of the things that we looked at was taxation. And we wanted to be in one of the lowest, if not the lowest, tax rate counties in Missouri. We also looked at zoning, and we also looked at government help. And by government help, I mean building permits. And, how much is the government going to be breathing down our necks, at our farm? And so those were things that we looked for. And in our neck of the woods, there are no building permits. Did you have to have a building permit to build your cabin?
No, I did not. Especially when you live off grid, you do not need a building permit in the county that I'm in. So that was obviously a huge research feature that I looked into as well. I think the key word for the bottom 93% in America is the word decentralized, and relearn those 19th century skills and dovetail them with 21st century technology. And when I say decentralized, that's why I mentioned that statistic earlier in the show where 90% of Americans live in urban, suburban America, and only 10% of us live rural. And if we all remember the Great Depression, a lot of the people who lived in rural America didn't even know there was a depression because they hunted, they fished, they raised animals, they grew gardens, they had these skill sets. And now with the technology of solar and alternative energy, we have even more options. Vince?
When you think back to the Great Depression, the first Great Depression, we're talking about starting in 1929, lasting all the way through until World War II. When you think back about that, do you think that the people who lived in the cities were trapped? Because, well, they lived in the city and they were dependent on the infrastructure of the city, whereas people who lived on the farms were dependent on themselves. If they were able to get water, they had water. If they didn't, they didn't. And those kinds of things. If they were able to raise food, they had it. If they didn't, they didn't. Did you see, or do you see those people as being trapped, and are they trapped today?
I think it's going to be a million times worse today. If we have a financial collapse, if we have an EMP, if we have war, God forbid, on our own soil, there's so many things that could happen from so many people who have an addiction to power, money, control at the very top. You got to remember, we have 8 people in the world. 8. That's 6, 7, 8. 8 who own a higher net worth than half of the earth combined. These are very dangerous people when they're not willing to help the masses and do everything to give soft kills, more government control, money and control is way worse than any meth addict on the street. And we're teaching our children how to push buttons, manage paper, and be politically correct. We're in a situation where real wages are down, retail sales is down, productivity growth down, discretionary income down. You know, we're running on debt, credit, subsidies, and bubbles. We have, in urban, suburban America, more banks own more residential homes than all individual Americans combined. So free market supply and demand is the worst in history it's ever been. 1 out of 6 is on welfare and food stamps. Our unemployed is 68th largest nation in the world if we were just to take our unemployed and make its own government, its own nation. So everything, and not to mention the fact that home ownership rate is the lowest in 60 years. And I can see why a lot of people, because of taxes and insurance and maintenance, don't want to purchase homes in urban, suburban America, because we're in a situation that they're looking long-term. They're saying, hey, today's baby boomers, our millennials going to be able to buy our homes when we have so many. Now, I know a lot of great millennials who have great jobs and make a lot of money, but when you look at it from a general statement, a lot of them are living downstairs in the basements of their parents. They have high debt. They have very few good job opportunities. And this is one of the reasons why I really talk, when I give a talk on issues like this, I talk to parents and grandparents and say, don't waste your kids' time and money, because they miss out on time leverage when they go to school and they come out with all this debt, and then they got to rent. They're forced to rent because of the time leverage. They got to pay these bills back, these loans back. So they can't establish equity and pay into principal early on and take advantage of time leverage. We have to reverse that trend.
Yeah, if you look at Silicon Valley, you can see these enormous salaries in hundreds of thousands of dollars, and yet these workers can't afford an apartment in Silicon Valley. They make a fortune by our standards, but yet they can't afford to live in an apartment. Off-grid Montana, Rich Evans. Rich, you talked about variety in land, and you recommend when someone buys land that he or she looks for variety, rocks, ridges, draws, water, and then, of course, then there's lumber and open land. And one of the reasons is that if you've got flat land right next to you, someone can buy another parcel, and next thing you know, you've got a development or a neighborhood going up, and you thought that everything was going to be peaceful and calm, and now you've got a whole bunch of neighbors, and then the next thing you know is you've got a mayor, and the next thing you know is you've got more taxation, and it just doesn't stop. You've been to our farm. Would you say that we, and independent from you, because we didn't know you when we bought our farm, and you didn't know us, would you say that we have achieved some of the things that you would want to have on your property here in Missouri?
Oh, absolutely. If I lived in your neck of the woods, which I probably wouldn't because of my love for nature and hunting and fishing, and I'm not a big cattle rancher kind of. That's not my shtick, if you will, like you do. But you have rolling hills. You do have variety. As far as variety goes in that neck of the woods, I mean, you don't have the mountains and things that we have here, obviously, but for where you live, you certainly have all the things that I talked about, including surface water and things of that nature. So, yeah, absolutely. And now that you're going to be going off-grid shortly, you'll definitely have more options as well. So, and you know what I like, too? You have all those edible plants. You have, I remember telling you that one of my favorite fruits was persimmons. I remember you telling me this, about 3-4 years ago. Oh, I probably have at least 100 persimmon trees growing wild on my property. Remember you told me that?
Yes.
And
yes.
Yeah, so you have a lot of what I look for, and you have a good enough chunk of land where if someone did buy next to you and put a subdivision, you'd still maintain your privacy, which is so important.
Yeah, we also have, in addition to the persimmon trees that are growing all over the farm, we have wild berries growing in lots of locations, and we have wild pears, and we have walnuts just to name a few of the edibles that we have here at the farm that are growing wild. So, and I'll bet you we have some grapes growing wild, too. We just have to find them. Yeah, and so, class, when you look at the land, what we did was we wanted a property that did not have a house on it. And the reason is we didn't want to own someone else's mistakes, because we had done that all of our lives. And typically what you do is you look for a property and you look for a house and you say, well, honey, what do you think? Is this one going to be okay? And do you like it? Well, the kitchen's not right, the living room's not right, the roof's not right, it needs all these repairs, the wiring is old, we don't know about the well, it'd be nice if it had a basement. So you look at all these mistakes that other people have made, and you can avoid all those. Rich Scheben did, we did, so he found property that did not have a home on it. He built his own. And he avoided the mistakes that others would have made if he bought someone's used house. We did exactly the same thing. We bought the land, and then we looked all over the land, and we looked for the right spot. And we picked the spot that was private. It was surrounded by trees, which meant that in the wintertime, we wouldn't have those gale winds. They'd be buffered by the trees, hundreds of feet of trees, real tall. But yet we found a spot that was high enough so that the water would roll downhill rather than in a basement. We found a location that if there were a forest fire, that we had enough distance between the trees and our house and our buildings that they wouldn't be set on fire. And we found a place that had very low taxes, because we don't want to feed the machine. We don't want to work and work and work and pay them just to leave us alone. So those were a lot of things that went into the equation. And of course, we needed to have enough sun for an off-grid system. And we wanted to have clean water. And we wanted to be able to, drill a well that was reasonably affordable, not a $20,000 well. We could get by with a $10,000 well. And so those are some of the things that went into our decision to buy this particular property. So we have the rocks, we've got some ridges, we've got some draws, we've got some bottomland, and we've got some rolling hills. We've got half of it in woods and half of it open for grass, so we can raise cattle, and they can help us, pay the cost of living here. It's like an extended family. And we go and check our cattle many times a day. And, they're family. So that's kind of how we live. And do we need much from outside? Well, yeah, we need some of the machinery and spare parts and things like that. But the bottom line is, if we were cut off from society starting now, we'd be all right for quite a while. And I'm sure you would be too.
Yeah. I just read an article this morning, Vince, that it's almost impossible to find a house less than $500,000 in the San Francisco area. Just kind of dovetailing what you said about Silicon Valley. I mean, California in general, Southern California especially, you could buy, I just decided just a few days ago I was going to put 80 acres on the market, not through a realtor, but just sell it on my own.
I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah. And, I'm going to ask $275,000 for 80 acres. But this is a property that, when you look at all these urban suburban areas like California, not being able to find a house under $500,000 a year, what do you think when this collapse comes? What's going to happen? Do you think the millennials are going to have enough money to buy those properties? Heck no. A lot of the reasons of these asset prices are so high in urban suburban America is because the central bank, and I use it in quote, printing of money, and a lot of foreign money of millionaires, Chinese millionaires coming in buying. But this is all going to dry up one of these days, especially when the stock market crashes, probably in 2018, and things are going to be quite compromised. Now,
let's talk about that. Let's talk about that property, that 80 acres. Can you describe it for us?
Yeah, you betcha. First of all, the property taxes, which Vince obviously highlighted several times, and is so important, is less than $100 per year. Now, for you 90% listening to this show in urban suburban America, that might seem surreal. But that is the case, and I can prove it because I pay the tax rolls every year. This is an end-of-road privacy property, which means it's the last property on a dirt road. It's a 6-mile dirt road. I have a 900-foot well, which was very expensive to put in. It's adjacent to over 1 million acres of National Forest Service or public land. Now, I want you to wrap your head around that. There's not many properties that are end of road, first of all, never mind adjacent to over 1 million acres of National Forest Service. And Vince, you did mention this earlier. I have no building covenants on this piece of land. So if you wanted to even build a building on timbers, on treated timbers, and not have to go through the formality or the cost of putting in a cement foundation, you could do so. And there's not many places that have that. Here in western Montana, there's one thing that makes a property sell or not, and that's called views. And the views I have on this property is incredible. I have the Whitefish Range, I have the Salish Range where this property sits, and views of the Canadian Rockies. So it's wild. I got elk, deer, mule deer, white-tailed deer. I've had wolverine through there, bobcat, mountain lions. I got lynx on the property. I hear wolves howling often. It's wild, 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 and there's nothing like this. Pretty much every animal known to man is on there, and I know people who don't live too far from that. I even saw 4 caribou several years ago. Now, the cons on the property, I would say, is it's a 4-wheel drive. I'd call it a rugged road, even though when I bought it over 10 years ago from a realtor, he drove me up there in his Prius. Believe it or not, I wouldn't recommend it. I would suggest a 4-wheel drive vehicle. And I think there's going to be a hunger for tangibility, especially getting away from the masses very shortly. And for people who have cash, they don't know where to put their money. And I think with if we go to an SDR, special drawing rights basket of currencies with 4, 5, 6 different currencies, that's going to make the U.S. dollar lose between 40 and 60% of its value. So I think this is a good time to sell, and it can be a win-win for both the seller and the buyer. And, I could talk a lot about this property. I was going to move on it. I was going to sell the property I'm on now. I have 2 years left. I have 2 more birthdays left before I hit 60. And I've got spinal stenosis and nerve damage. I've lost 90% of the strength in my arms. And I think another homesteading, pioneering journey is just not in my cards. I really, really thought about this for a long time. And if I was a little younger, I think this would be the perfect property for me. Now, age has nothing to do with it in the sense that I could always hire someone to do all the work for me. But I have a property already set up for everything I need here in the Eureka, Montana Valley here in northwest Montana. And this property is about, 30, 40 minutes away from here. And again, it's 6 miles up a dirt road. And I was planning actually not even worrying about plowing it, literally taking a snowmobile up and back and not worrying about a commute situation and living that adventure dream. So, Vince, if you have any questions after the break, please feel free to.
I do. Rich Shealy, I'll be right back. We're talking about land, and we're using one of his properties as an example, what to look for, and some of the pros and cons. We're talking about land and what to look for, and you mentioned four-wheeler, and we use a Jeep here at the farm. Why? Well, we've got the need for high ground clearance. We traverse fields. We drive it pass through the woods. We have trails that we drive it through to check on the cows and work on fencing. So we have several four-wheel drive type vehicles. We have four-wheelers, we have dirt bikes, and we have an old Jeep. And of course, we have trucks. And all those are necessary for our farming operation. And when you mention this particular property, this 80 acres, what comes to my mind is the absolute minimum that someone would need in order to be somewhat self-sufficient as a farmer is 40 acres, a minimum. So if you've doubled that with the 80 acres, that sounds like a good way to go. The taxes at $100 or less per year sounds like a good way to go. The freedom from government help is certainly a good way to go. And a number of our instructors do exactly what you're talking about, live on a farm or live away from the city and live away from neighborhoods. Now, the dirt road, I'd like to spend a minute talking about that. We live on a dirt road by choice. Now, it's a double-edged sword. Our cars, trucks get dusty. We drive with the windows up when we go across the dirt roads. But dirt roads are a barrier to entry because most people don't want to go down a dirt road. It's rocky. You can get your tires poked out, get flats. And they're narrow. And generally, they're not all that well maintained. So living on a dirt road is going to help ensure some more privacy. However, if you live in an area where we do, or where Rich Scheben's talking about, if you need a job and you're going to move there because of a job, you might want to forget it. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. This is a retirement, semi-retirement property. This is a legacy property. This is a private ski trail property. This is a hunting preserve property, an investment, someone who wants to get away, someone who wants to teach their kids and grandkids skill sets and think long term. This is absolutely that type of property. If you're coming to Northwest Montana and you think you're going to look for a job and pay off the property and commute 6 miles up and down the dirt road, it's just not going to happen, especially at this particular dirt road. Heck, we're heading into with all this new technology of robotics and automation. Where literally they're taking orders for 2018 for flying cars. So with millionaires and billionaires buying property like crazy, this could be one of the last opportunities for the middle class to buy a piece of property like this, and that's why it's only $275,000. And it sounds like a lot, I know, but when houses, you can't even find a house in Southern California for under $500,000. When you put it in perspective like that, it's not. If anybody's interested, folks, let me give you an email to contact me, and that's mtmountains@gmail.com. MT is the abbreviation for Montana, then the word mountains, which is plural. Again, mtmountains@gmail.com. So it's for people who want to think outside the box, for people who know we have a crash coming. We have something coming that's going to be a calamity for America, because we all know that everything that's happening is unsustainable. We all know that Donald Trump inherited demolition and sabotage. Things aren't going to get better in the long run. I just don't see it happening. It's just math. It's just not my opinion. It's math, and I do a lot of reading to back this up. So if anybody's interested, please contact me, and then we can talk on the phone with more detail and specificity. I'll send you pictures, and we'll take it from there. Vince?
Well, Rich, we're out of time. And, one of the things I keep thinking about is this 2040 end of new production of gasoline and diesel-powered vehicles in Great Britain. And what impact will that have? And if they're leading the way and we're following their lead, it's going to be lousy. And I don't want to be in a city. I'm glad we're in the country, and I'm glad we're paving our own way. And class, if you're interested, you might want to consider paving your own way and getting out of the way of what's coming. And imagine life without your car. Imagine your life without a diesel engine or a gas-powered engine. Rich Scheben, thanks so much for being
class.